Good morning, Brother Chad Long, the Ohio Baptist Church here, and it's good to be back with you today. I apologize for the tardiness of the video. I had some computer issues this morning, and I was not able to get this posted sooner, or even recorded. I was having some issues. Windows updates just come when they want to. So anyhow, well, we're here now, and we are in Ruth chapter 3, where we've been talking about Naomi's plan for Ruth. Remember that Ruth had been faithful to Naomi. She's following her, and she's following her God and her people and her ways. And she comes to the threshing floor of Boaz, where her mother-in-law told her to go. And I'll remind you that the threshing floors back then were intentionally put up high so that the crosswinds would blow the chaff off the wheat and off the barley. The only time you find a threshing floor in a valley is when they were trying to hide what they were doing from their captors, in cases like when they're under the Philistines and the Midianites and they're paying tribute and they're stealing all their food. But for the most part, in a free nation where they don't have to hide what they're doing, the threshing floor is up high. Most people will remember that the threshing floor in the temple at Jerusalem was built on an old threshing floor that David purchased for the purpose of building a house of God there. So, and that's the reason it's up on a mountain, or it was. Anyway, so Ruth comes to the threshing floor. Now, there's a party there the evening before. I think families were permitted to go to the festivities to celebrate the harvest, but not permitted to stay the night for various reasons that I won't get into. But anyway, the men would stay. They would stay with the grain until all the work was done, and they would even spend the night there. And again, families could come to the festivities, but they didn't typically stay the night. So Ruth is instructed to go to the party, probably midway through it, so she's not noticed, that people are already having a good time when she gets there. So I think that she gets there sometime in the middle of the party, spends some time figuring out where Boaz sleeps, where he's planning to sleep, and then she does as she's instructed by her mother-in-law. So we will jump in about verse 8. I know we had read a little further than that, but I just want to back up to verse 8. And you'll remember she followed her mother's instructions. She's marked where he's going to sleep. And now when he lies down to sleep, she lays down at his feet. I happen to believe she laid down this way at his feet. His head is on the grain, elevated somewhat. His feet are facing the outward edges of the threshing floor. I imagine this thing was full of grain. This floor was just covered in grain, piles. And so he's out on the edge of this thing, probably hidden by stacks of grain to some degree. And he's sleeping at somewhat of an angle, his head up on the grain, his feet out toward the edge of the threshing floor, and she's laying out there possibly on the ground, not on the actual threshing floor. We picture concrete because we're so spoilt to it, but I don't, they didn't have that then, but it would have been some sort of rock, some sort of a flat, planed off space like they would build on for anything. But as you got to the edge of it, they wouldn't care so much about it being flat and hard. So anyhow, she's laying out there on that edge. And again, she could have been laying perpendicular to him, but I don't think so. I think she's laying with her feet to his, leaning out. And in verse 8 it says, "It came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet." So he discovers that she's there, and it startles him. Now, I happen to picture in my mind's eye them fighting over the covers, but we don't know that. We just know that it's for whatever reason he recognizes that someone's there. And being that he is outdoors and he's asleep and startled, for all we know, he thought there was an animal after him. I mean, we don't know. I've often wondered about snakes crawling up next to people in their sleep, trying to find a place to get warm. I mean, you don't know what'll crawl up next to you. So I would have woken up afraid too. But it says at midnight he was afraid. He turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you? Who art thou?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman." Skirt here means covering, and I don't think this had anything to do with a blanket. I think that this is symbolic. She just meant, I want you to spread your protection over me, whether it's an actual blanket that she's asking for, or not, it's still symbolic. She makes a point to say, because thou art a kinsman, a near kinsman. So she's basically saying, I would like for you to perform the uh, the the law regarding a kinsman redeemer. And you'll notice that when she asks for this, and by the way, let me point this out to you. Some time ago, and I'm not going to turn there to save time, but maybe a couple of lessons ago, I read to you from Deuteronomy where it talks about this law. And just off the top of my head, without a note in front of me, I don't remember where that was, but I will find it for the next time. But just let me refresh your memory. In the law, it stated that a kinsman was supposed to raise up a child to the dead. And this is not just for that. It's also to redeem the land so it doesn't fall into the hand of strangers, and to redeem those who have fallen into slavery or poverty. I mean, there was a lot that went into this redeeming. It wasn't just about children, but a big part of it is raising up seed to the dead brethren. So now this didn't apply if they had children by the father before he died. There were other things you could do for widows that had children, and orphans especially. But this particular law is for widows who have lost their husband before they were able to bring about children by that man. So by law, according to the passage in Deuteronomy, she could have gone to the gates of the city, which is where business and courtroom proceedings are handled. She could have appeared there and demanded and had him called there by name, not necessarily just him. As we're going to see in a minute, there's a kinsman closer than him. But she could have had them called before the elders, embarrassed somewhat, and shamed into doing the right thing. She could have also, if they refused, had them remove their shoe, which was a disrespect, a sign of disrespect, and also it was a way to confirm that this was the way this was going to be. And they had the right to spit in your face. The woman had the right to spit in your face if you refused her the law. Now, let me be real clear. Just because the law said that you had to marry a particular woman that belonged at one point to your brother or cousin or whatever, did not mean they could make you do it. And they wouldn't stone you if you didn't. But you would be publicly humiliated, and that's what this is about. You were given the opportunity to choose. If you stood your ground and said, no, I don't want to do this, and we're going to see that later, so I don't want to get too into that. But I want you to know, she could have done this, and she didn't do this. And I don't know, really, because she is from Moab, I don't know if they would have honored it anyway, because she's not of Jewish blood. That's something that I would have to ask somebody that knows more than me. But at least for this study, we're going to assume that she could have followed the law and that this could have been done that way. She doesn't do it that way. Look at verse 10. He said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followedest not young men, whether poor or rich. It's a couple of things to note, and I mentioned these last time, I know, but again, I want to be thorough. First of all, she could have used any means at her disposal to try to remarry. She could have. Some women are incredibly manipulative when it comes to finding a husband with money. Or, she could have just done the normal things and tried to date, tried to find somebody to settle down, be happy with. She could have done a great number of things, but I don't believe this is why she followed Naomi back to Israel. It was not her intention to seek out a husband or try to find happiness for herself. I honestly believe she was selflessly caring for Naomi. She just wanted to take care of Naomi. I don't think she put it like a lot of young people. She just may have been a little impetuous and didn't think much about what she was going to do in the future. She was just concerned about, feeding herself, feeding her mother-in-law, and not abandoning someone that she loved so much. I don't think she'd put an incredible amount of thought into her future. And Boaz notices this, and he applauds her that. But he also, I think part of this verse, where he says, Blessed be thou of the Lord, for thou hast shown more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning. Not only kindness in allowing an older man the opportunity to be her husband and kinsman redeemer, but also the fact that she didn't humiliate him or drag him before a group of elders or make a big a deal about this. And again, I'll share that passage from Deuteronomy probably tomorrow. But just keep in mind, she had a legal right to at least ask for this to be done. She didn't do that. She did this privately. She did this carefully, and she did it thoughtfully. And now look at verse 11. He says, "Now my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know thou art a virtuous woman." There's a whole lot in that verse. First of all, fear not. She had to fear rejection. She had to wonder what he was going to say. I remember being a young man, and I remember how scary it was to ask a girl out for the first time. You don't know what they're going to say. Sometimes you get rejected. I've been rejected. I know that's hard to believe, right? But I've been told no, not interested, So there's that level of fear. There's a whole lot going on, just in what she's done. To come to the threshing floor, to be bold enough to ask him, to risk rejection, to not know what he's going to say or how he's going to react. I mean, there's a lot goes into this, and so it's very comforting of him to say in verse 11, "Fear not. I will do unto thee all that thou requirest." In other words, I'm perfectly willing and able to redeem you and to marry you and to do all that you're asking. But, and this is where the plot begins to thicken, so pay attention. He does say, "All of my city knows you're a virtuous woman," and that was a wonderful thing to say, because what he's saying is, I don't have the slightest hesitation about becoming your redeemer or your husband or however you want to word this. Because not only is it my duty, not only are you asking and you qualify, but you're a virtuous woman. There were times when there were wives, and I don't know how often this happened, but it probably happened more than you think. There were times when there were women who were eligible for this to be done who were not somebody you want to be married to. If you have a brother that marries somebody you care nothing for reasons I won't even begin to try to explain, I'll give you a couple examples. Maybe she's a noisy eater. Maybe she's not a very good housekeeper. Maybe she's a big talker and you're not. Maybe she's an annoying person. Maybe she's a crude person and not particularly fun to be around. I mean, I don't know. But that's something you run into when you're talking about the wife of some of your brethren, a cousin or brother or whatever, and your duty is to marry them. It's not about whether you like them or not. Well, there were probably times when this happened where it was the last thing somebody wanted to do. It's like, man, I don't really want to marry her and get her pregnant and have to deal with all of that. I mean, I'm sure that happened. What Boaz is saying here in verse 11 is, I'm willing to do this. And I don't have the slightest hesitation, because everybody in Israel knows you're a virtuous woman, a good woman, a beautiful woman, somebody that I would have no qualms at all about redeeming and marrying and having children with. So there's just a whole lot in that verse. Verse 12, "And now it is true, I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I." And I'll explain that. A couple of possibilities. First of all, Ruth's father-in-law that died, Elimelech, probably had brothers. And his brothers probably had children. So this is either Boaz is either a brother or cousin of Elimelech, or he's one of the children of Elimelech's brothers. And because he's probably a cousin, probably a first cousin, there is the chance that there's either a cousin or a brother or an uncle. Remember, Elimelech's brothers would be uncles to Chilion and Mahlon. So they would have been uncles by marriage to Ruth. So you do have some potential for family closer than Boaz. I think that there was a brother or uncle or something along those lines closer, and Boaz is probably a first cousin. So while he is a near kinsman, he's not the nearest, and that is an issue, because the nearest kin has the first opportunity to fulfill this role. We're going to get to that, but I got to move on so we don't run out of time. He says, "It is true, I am thy near kinsman, but there's a kinsman nearer than I." He says, "Tarry this night." There's a reason for that too. He doesn't want her trying to travel home in the middle of the night. First of all, it's dangerous. There's things that can happen to you, but more importantly, it doesn't look good for a young woman, especially a virtuous young woman who's done nothing wrong. It doesn't look good for her to be wandering around at night. If you remember, I preached not too long ago about the young woman who went out looking for Solomon in the Song of Solomon. After she wouldn't open the door for him, she went hunting for him, and And they beat her up pretty good because they thought she was a woman of the night. They should have recognized who she is in relation to Solomon, but they didn't. And I'm getting off track, but it just wasn't a good idea for women to be running around in the middle of the night. And remember, this is after midnight. So he says, tarry this night. That means just lay down, stay where you're at. It shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman well. Well here means, so be it. There's nothing I can do. If he's willing, then he's willing. And well, I mean, at least that handles that. I don't think that's what he wants to happen, but he says that. He says, if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman, which just reiterates that there is a choice. We're going to look more at that choice in the next chapter. But he says, if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then I will do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord lives. Lie down until the morning. So he says, just lay down, get some rest. I'm glad we had this worked out. Now let's just lay down and rest until in the morning. So verse 14, she lays at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another, and he said, let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. Nothing happened that shouldn't happen, but you just don't need that type of thing talked about because, it just takes one person mouthing off something to get a rumor started. So it's just best that this works out so that nobody knows this took place, at least in that time. I'm sure they talked about it way later because we had it written here. Anyway, so let it not be known that a woman came into the floor, and he said, bring the veil that thou hast upon thee and hold it. Remember, she wore a veil to the party to keep herself somewhat hidden from Boaz until she knew where he was going to lay down. She didn't let on that she was there. I think she showed up, toward the end of the party, after everybody was, kind of winding down, and where she wouldn't make as much of a scene or be noticed. She has a veil, and he says, hold your veil out. I want to fill it with something. So in verse 15, she holds it, and he measures out 6 measures of barley and lays it on her, and she goes into the city. She goes home. Verse 16, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. Now, I've heard some different commentaries on this. I've heard some say, well, it's early morning. She just wants to make sure that's her when she opens the door, and that's why she says, who are you? But, I've also read some stuff, and I lean this way, that says it wasn't about who are you. It was another way of saying, who are you going to be? What have you discovered? Is it like you had, like we had hoped would happen? So who art thou? Art thou Mrs. Boaz, or art thou not Mrs. Boaz? Or is this thing going to work like we had hoped it would or not? So anyway, when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And that kind of lends credence to my thoughts there, because her response is not, this is Ruth. Her response is, this is all that the man had to say. So who art thou possibly does mean that, and that's just what I get out of it. Moving on, verse 17, she said, these 6 measures of barley gave he me. For he said to me, go not empty unto thy mother-in-law. This is another picture of provision. He wants to take care of her for the rest of her life, but at the very least, even if he's not able to do that, he wants to take care of her for the, for the moment. So he sends her home with more food, which is not what she came for. It's a picture of the way God blesses us, even when he doesn't have to, and that's not what we're after. I can tell you, I celebrated my graduation yesterday, and I was blessed beyond measure because of the love and the character of our church and the way that people treated me. They weren't around when I decided to go to school. They weren't around when, at the beginning or even close to midway through. I mean, they didn't have any dog in that fight. It wasn't their idea, and but yet they showed nothing but love and grace and just blessing upon me, and I'm so blessed to be a part of this community, and I've been so well treated here. Everybody just treats me much like this. She it's not Boaz's fault she's in the predicament she's in, but he still wants to bless her, and he gives her 6 measures of barley, and she takes it home. And in verse 18, which we'll close with, and I'm through for today, then said she, sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall, for the man will not be in rest until he hath finished the thing this day. You'll remember that Boaz had said, we'll take care of this in the morning. He's not going to wait. And Jesus is a lot like Boaz. One of the reasons we talk about our kinsman redeemer is because this is a picture of Christ. But when it comes to his children, he doesn't take as long as you might think. Sometimes it seems like he's in no hurry to do what we ask him to do, but it's just because of our perspective and the way that we look at things. The only reason he hasn't come back to get us already is because he loves us so much. He's trying to give everybody every opportunity. But when it comes to our salvation, that's immediate. When it comes to helping us through something, it's always on time. The Lord doesn't drag these things out unless there's a very good reason. So in this case, he's ready to redeem her as soon as can be done. And when he redeems us, it's an immediate thing. When he saves us, there's no waiting. He takes care of it immediately. Well, Boaz couldn't do anything at midnight, but as soon as courts open the next day, he's going to get this taken care of. And we're going to look at that some more, Lord willing, tomorrow. I hope you've gotten something out of this. I hope that just as Boaz told Ruth, fear not, trust in the Lord. Let him show you what it is he's trying to show you, and let him take care of things. He knows what he's doing. Y'all have a blessed day.